children, if you're on campus, students, if you're still in this building, you need to be with a coach or a teacher. If you're not, you have 3 minutes to get out of this building or you're trespassing. If your coach is not on campus, you have to leave. Thank you and depart.
There might be some more information on this page to kind of help you out. Yep, right around down here. Because we didn't really talk about that. Take another minute to wrap up your thoughts.
So it's where it's talking about phosphorylation,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
right? Which just means what?
That the phosphorylation is being done through a series of redox reactions. So if you only have 2 phosphates, then 3 phosphates.
Right, but this one's taking place in the mitochondria, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I have that written down. I guess it's something like this in hydrogen.
Which one?
Like oxidative phosphorylation
No,
and
it's
further phosphorylation.
Nope. Just try to take your either
You
best
just
guess.
differentiate it based on where it happens, right?
Yeah, I did. But I just want, I remember. I don't have time to look, but
Where it takes place is a good place to start. So you're pretty good if you can kind of take that from the reading for right now. All right, so let's talk about this. Nicole, could you share with us one term or phrase you were unsure of but were able to define on your own?
Phosphorylation
Phosphorylation, that's a big one. What is phosphorylation?
is the process of adding a phosphate
To a what?
to an ADP.
In this case, to an ADP molecule. Good. Rebecca, could you share a term or a phrase that you were unsure of that you were able to define on your own?
yeah, cytochromes,
Okay, and what are cytochromes?
they're proteins in the cell membrane of the thylakoid.
Okay, so there are proteins in the thylakoid membrane.
Yeah.
Good. Ben, could you share a term or a phrase, if you had any, that you were unable to define?
Sure, proton motive force.
Proton motive force. Rebecca and Nicole, would either of you have a definition or, based on your reading, would you be able to help Ben out with defining what a proton motive force is?
Well, just based on context, I would say the movement of protons.
Movement of protons, okay,
The force
good.
that moves it.
Rebecca, do you have anything to add? Okay, good. So that is what I would put for proton motive force, just moving protons, and using protons to create something. And in this case, we're going to be talking about ATP. Okay, so put that worksheet that you're working on to the side for right now, and we're going to kind of switch gears a little bit and work a little bit more in detail about summarizing osmosis in mitochondria and chloroplasts. So on your desks, I gave you 2 cutouts. Ben, I will grab you your cutout. Actually, I'm out of cutouts for that. Could you look
That's all right.
on with them?
I got you.
Sweet. All right. So let's go through with labeling these diagrams. Let's start off right here. This diagram, what is this a picture of? A mitochondria or chloroplast?
Mitochondria.
That's the mitochondria. Good. So let's go through and start working through labeling some of these parts. What is this little space? Or actually, let's start with the outside. What is the outside layer called? What would you think the outside layer of a mitochondria would be?
Mitochondrial covering.
Mitochondrial covering, okay? What do we call something that's protecting this organelle?
Membrane.
A membrane, okay? And is this membrane found on the inside or the outside?
Outside.
Outside, good. So this is going to be right here, our outer membrane. So go ahead and label this on that little handout that I gave you. That's your outer membrane. All right, so Ben's already showed us that he has this information. Now, Rebecca or Nicole, let's talk about this piece right here. So this arrow is pointing to this entire series or this entire membrane found inside the mitochondria. Using what we just talked about, Nicole, what do you think this arrow is pointing to?
The inner membrane.
That's your inner membrane, good. So go ahead and label that on your drawing. Rebecca, so we have our outer membrane here and our inner membrane. What do you think the name for the area in between those two would be called?
The inner membrane space.
The intermembrane space. Good. Intermembrane space. All right. Someone share with me, what are these projection-like structures that are made up of the inner membrane called?
Cristae.
These are your cristae. Good. Go ahead and label that on your diagram. And the last thing we need to label is this inner part inside of the inner membrane. What is that called?
Matrix.
That's your mitochondrial matrix. Good. All right. So now that we have the mitochondria labeled, let's look at our other diagram, which is a picture of a what?
Chloroplast.
Chloroplast. Excellent. All right, so let's start. The same logic kind of applies when we're trying to label these parts. So let's start with letter A. It's pointing to the outside of a chloroplast. Rebecca, what would that be called?
The outer membrane.
Okay, that's going to be your outer membrane. Good. Then what would C be pointing to here? That inner line found inside the outer membrane.
Your inner membrane.
It's your inner membrane. Good. Now what I want you guys to keep in the back of your mind for right now, because we need to compare these two, start thinking about the fact that both of them have an outer and inner membrane. That means that they both have a double layer. All right, so just keep that in mind when you're comparing those two structures there. Okay, so C is pointing to the inner membrane. Letter F, it's pointing to that empty space outside or inside that chloroplast. What is that called?
Stroma.
That's our stroma. Thank you, Ben. All right. Letter B, Nicole, take a second and look through your book if you need to and tell me, what is B pointing to, this whole stack called? What is this entire stack called found inside the chloroplast?
The granum.
That's your granum. Good. And Rebecca, E is pointing to the individual discs that make up a granum. What is that called?
Thylakoid.
That's your thylakoid. Good. And then my drawing appears a little bit different than the one on your handout, but what I'm trying to point to is the inside of the thylakoid. What is that called? Anyone go ahead and say it out. It's the space inside the thylakoid. What do you think the term is to describe that? Don't think too complex here.
Thylakoid space.
Thylakoid space. Perfect. Now you might also see this as thylakoid space, or you might see this as thylakoid lumen. Okay? So go ahead and write both of those words, because you might see both of them. You need to know that they're both referring to the inside of the thylakoid. All right, so this is just a quick review of the different parts that we've already talked about. Any questions about labeling these two things? All right, great. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a graphic organizer. And this is just going to be a way for you to organize the process in mitochondria and chloroplast and kind of have like a cheat sheet for you while you're studying. So let's go ahead and set up our foldable. Everyone grab a piece of construction paper, please. There should already be one at your table. What I would like you to do is fold your construction paper about 3/4 of the way down. So this is what we call hamburger style. So don't fold it long ways. Fold it about halfway down, other way, Ben. Or there you go. Good. Yep, with about 3/4 remaining. Or about an inch remaining, excuse me. Should have a little flap there. Perfect. Now take your scissors and cut that front flap, only the front flap, right up through the middle. All the way to the top. So that you have two pieces that open up, two shutters, essentially. Good. Rebecca's got it. Nicole's got it. Ben's got it. Awesome. All right. Take that bottom inch and fold it up on top of those two flaps that you just created.
All the way or halfway?
All the way so that it just, yeah, just like that. All right, so what you guys are going to do is you're going to glue each picture down onto each flap of the construction paper. So your chloroplast picture will go on one side, and your mitochondrial picture will go on the other. It doesn't matter which side you choose. So go ahead and glue that down first. Looking good. Good, that looks good. Back of that looks good. That's looking good. Okay, so the first thing I want you guys to do, you can use an article to help you if you need it. On that bottom flap, I want you to write and define the term chemiosmosis. So write the word chemiosmosis, and I want you to define it. You can use your article or your book to help you define that term. All right, so what did you get for the definition of chemiosmosis?
Production of ATP in chloroplasts or mitochondria.
Production of ATP in chloroplasts or mitochondria. That's perfect. You can also say something along the lines of using a proton concentration gradient to make ATP. Either one would be an acceptable response here. So I'll give you the instructions and then let you guys get started. On your inner flap, on the top flap of this foldable, what I would like you to do is write out a structural comparison of each structure. So talk about the structure of the mitochondria under the mitochondria flap. Talk about the structure of the chloroplast underneath that flap. On the bottom flap, you're going to give me 4 pieces of information. What is it also known as? This is found in your article. What is the source of the electrons? Where are those electrons coming from that we're going to be using? What is the hydrogen reservoir? This is a term that shows up in your article, so you definitely need to go back and refer to that to figure this out. And then I want you to summarize how are we making ATP? How does this process, chemiosmosis, occur in a mitochondria and in a chloroplast? Make sure you use specific structures, and the diagrams on the front will help you with that. Are there any questions about what to do on the inside of your foldable? Perfect. And then lastly, you guys will create a Venn diagram, which will just compare the two again. Some of the information will be repeated. This is just to serve as a summary for you guys, a quick reference as you're working through this process. Any questions about this foldable? Perfect. I'll leave this up here as an example, and if you need it while you're working, feel free to come up and reference it in terms of setting up your foldable. Let me know if you have any questions, and you can use each other and your book to work through this as well.